Awesome. We will be starting now. Thank you all for joining us. Let me just share my screen. Let me know with a thumbs up if you guys can see it. Perfect. Then we can get started. So good afternoon. Welcome to today's session, Planning for Parental Leave. My name is Patricia Diaz, Director, Partner, and Founder Success here at Digital Undivided. Digital Undivided, if you're not familiar with us and you're joining us from our partner organization Startout, we are the leading nonprofit leveraging our data, programs, and advocacy to catalyze economic growth for Latina and Black women entrepreneurs and innovators. So our goal is to really create a world where all women of color own their work and their worth. And our mission is to move the entrepreneurial ecosystem forward to increase funding, access, and opportunities for women of color in business and innovation. We have 3 pillars within Digital Undivided: programs, research, and thought leadership. We were the first to debut authoritative research on the state of Latina and Black women founders with our Project Diane report, as well as this incorporated us to expand our research efforts along with our programming. So our programs: Start Big, Breakthrough, do fellowship in the new C-suite, mobilize community, resources, advisory, and investment to support women of color founders across different stages in their entrepreneurial and funding journeys. With us, we also have Start Out, and I will let Kayla discuss a little bit more about the organization.
Awesome. Thank you so much for Digital Undivided for inviting us to partner on this event today. I'm Kayla. I'm the partnership manager at Startout, and we're a national organization focused on supporting LGBTQ+ entrepreneurs. We're really focused on driving economic empowerment for the LGBTQ+ community through our work. And so we have our own accelerator program, as well as an access to capital program, making investor connections, a mentorship program, expert office hours, and just a really large community of LGBTQ+ founders who are working on their businesses and are looking to make connections. So we would love to have anyone who's interested join us. I'll put my email in the chat as well. So if you are interested in Startout, we can connect and I can kind of share more and let you know how to get started with us.
Awesome. And then with us today is Arianna Taboada for today's session, Planning for Parental Leave and Designing a Plan that Works for You, Your Family, and Your Business. Our speaker is a speaker, an author, and a founder of The Expecting Entrepreneur, a consulting firm that helps entrepreneurs design parental leave plans that meet their business model and personal needs. Her contributions on that topic of parental leave and respectful perinatal care have been featured in peer-reviewed scientific journals, industry conferences, and major media outlets. She's also the author of The Expecting Entrepreneur, a guide to parental leave planning for self-employed business owners. And we're so happy to have her here. And I'll turn it over to her to start her session.
Thanks, Patricia. We're gonna pass the slide baton, and I'll bring up slides as well. And as we go, feel free to drop questions in the chat. We're gonna have folks tracking what's going on in the chat, and we will have time for Q&A. So I'm so excited to be here with you all, and thank you to Digital Undivided and Startout for hosting. And I loved getting a sense in the chat of where people are coming from. So I feel like Dallas coming in particularly strong today. And today we're gonna cover quite a bit. So we'll talk about funding scenarios for parental leave, everyone's favorite topic, operational considerations. How will you keep things moving if you are taking leave? We'll talk about some of the best practices when it comes to communication and with clients and investors. And then we'll also discuss returning to work and how it's different when you are an entrepreneur than when you work for a company or an employee. And I'll recap a couple key kind of takeaways in terms of planning steps and timelines that, that folks tend to always ask questions about, and then we'll get into discussion. So before we dive in, I just wanted to give a little bit of background, and I always like to share like why am I here? why this topic? And so I think I'll start with saying, I don't know if many of you all feel this way, but I was definitely someone who trained as a health professional and then found myself in the world of entrepreneurship somewhat unexpectedly, and started working one-on-one, like Patricia was saying right at the beginning, one-on-one with founders to plan their parental leave, much more based on my training as a maternal health professional and social worker, and really thinking about what are the support systems people needed. And after about 8 years of working with folks, it was really clear there are some key strategies that work across business model, that work across types of leave, types of businesses, industries. And so I ended up consolidating everything into the Expecting Entrepreneur, which is a book, as well as an advising and educational company. And so we do things like this, have community sessions and master classes on the topic, and continue to work one-on-one with founders. So let's get into it. Why is it worth taking some of our precious time to talk about parental leave, especially as entrepreneurs who are busy and your time could be spent in any number of ways? So I'd like to start with locating us around what is the state of pregnancy parenting in the startup ecosystem. The reality is that I think a lot of folks in this room will know that 40% of businesses in the US are owned or headed by women, and that is increasingly growing. And that female founders are coming up against some of the kind of preconceived notions that investors have around being kind of childbearing age, reporting frequently when asked about their plans to have children, and worrying about how pregnancy or building their family will impact funding, their kind of perceived ability to lead an organization, and the pervasive kind of narrative that somehow pregnancy, parenting, and building thriving businesses are at odds with each other. And the other reality, and why it's worth taking some time to think about parental leave as founders, is that there are relatively few resources available for startups in the US context. We don't have a federal paid leave policy. State paid leave programs are few and far between and can be tough to navigate. And the reality that early stage startups typically don't have established paid leave policies. And so we're really trying to figure it out in a system that doesn't have a whole lot of infrastructure. And the last piece I'll say on why talk about parental leave is that it is unique for founders and business owners. So the structure that you might hear people who work for large corporations or even small employers, is that there often is a kind of standard or a policy in place. And the reality is that that's often not true for small businesses and startups. And founders, even as they are taking leave, in the early stage of growth, may still have key touch points and key work streams that they need to stay connected on in order to help the company on its trajectory. The last piece is that it's actually an opportunity around organizational culture. So when founders, who are often some of the first people to model what it's like to take leave at their company, especially if they're a small company, have a small team, that can oftentimes set the tone and culture around what is possible for others in their company. So let's dive into funding strategies. So I mentioned at the top that we have kind of a small number of states that have paid leave programs in the US. Currently, there is 8 that are fully functioning and 4 that are coming down the pipeline. So when paid leave programs pass at a state level, they tend to have a ramp up period and initial implementation phase. And so you can see the dates that are coming up for some states. And you notice there, this is 12 out of 50 states is a relatively small percentage. And so if you are in a state that has a program, that is the primary route that I often recommend looking into as a business owner, and involves paying into the state paid leave policy often in order to be able to access the benefits. For people in the rest of the states that don't have a paid leave policy, I'll talk through some of the funding strategies to consider. You can purchase disability insurance for the company. This is similar to how you would purchase health insurance or liability insurance through an insurance broker. And it functions similarly in terms of paying in and then being able to access those benefits. And so there's a group disability insurance option that is available for smaller businesses as well as larger businesses. If you do live in one of the state programs, or in one of the states that has a paid leave program, the state level programs often function similar to disability or sometimes are under a disability plan. And so it's a similar, it becomes a similar process if you are living in a state with a paid leave policy to opt into the paid leave policy, or if you live in a state that doesn't have a paid leave policy and you opt into a disability insurance plan with a private insurer, the benefits often look pretty similar and comparable. So this is really important if you're running a remote company where people, if you have employees who live in different states, and you might be interested in building out a paid leave policy that's equitable no matter where people live. The second thing I'll mention is building a leave fund into company reserves. So similar to how you are thinking about the trajectory in terms of hiring and oftentimes building up some cash to be able to do that. I'm really thinking about what is a line item that could be built into the reserves to account for the reality that people might be taking leave at some point. And that's often helpful if you are trying to offer paid leave, and also if you are trying to offer coverage if someone goes out on leave, if you're looking to backfill a role if you are going out on leave. Having a leave fund can be used in that way. And the last one is that I've seen a pregnancy and kind of upcoming parental leave be somewhat of a forcing function to have people really do an audit of expenses. Oftentimes when we're in fast growth mode, there's a lot coming in and going out. And so taking the time to look through and say, while someone is out on leave, are there certain things that certain softwares or certain key line items that you actually won't be needing to use for those couple months? I'll mention a few other resources in case folks are interested in getting a lot more details. A Better Balance is an organization that I always turn to if you're trying to get a sense of the paid leave programs across states. They have a great breakdown of how much coverage is provided, the amount that benefits last, and kind of the criteria for accessing those benefits. And then Parento is run by a friend called Dirk Dobler, and he has been trying really hard to figure out private insurance specifically for paid leave for small businesses. It's one of the few solutions out there that's really aiming towards small businesses. Right now, it starts at about 25 employees, but I know he's always exploring ways to kind of pool groups together for businesses that might only have 3 or 4 employees, and ways to provide accessible paid leave for micro businesses. And then Penguin, I'm based in California. California is one of the oldest paid leave programs, but it is pretty hard to navigate. So I always like to lift up Penguin as an example of a paid leave navigator. And this is something that if you are pregnant and trying to figure out, like, what would I even qualify for? What do I legally have access to? It's a great portal for trying to figure that out. So operationally, I actually want to start with a question here. If folks could drop into the chat, what are the different types of roles that on an average week you find yourself showing up as? I'm going to open the chat for myself and see. I'm seeing Brittany's comment of proud to see. Yeah, if you see your state on that paid leave state, it's always a moment of like, yes, my state has is supporting me. And I see Claire's comment on, millions of different roles that you are playing on the day-to-day, and that sounds about right. I often, people are toggling back and forth between the highest level strategy and then the really concrete customer support, and then also content creation and building out culture and supervising staff. The bank, accountant, CFO, all of the above. And so you all could probably name like 20 things in addition to what's on here, to the roles that you play on any given day of the week. And so operations becomes kind of a cornerstone of a strong paid leave plan, or a strong parental leave plan in general. So to talk a little bit more about operations, I want to share, this is a fake picture, but a real person. So I'm going to talk about Lola for a second. Lola's a former client who owns a design firm. And we started working together when she was about halfway through her pregnancy. She was managing a team of 6, and was still pretty involved in day-to-day client work. So she found herself often being the linchpin between getting the information from a client and then getting it to the appropriate staff person, interfacing. She was the person who clients would send their questions to, and she would then figure out who is the right person to direct this to, even when she wasn't doing, she had her team actually doing the client work. She was kind of the client-facing person. And so with Lola, what we spend a lot of time figuring out, and what I often recommend as an initial step, is really spending some time looking at what you are doing on a day-to-day basis and sorting into categories of truly things only you can do, and the things that are marketing related, are customer service related, are any number of categories of roles that you might be playing, but that people other than you could potentially do. And taking the time, once you have sorted like all the tasks, to really think about, are these things documented, and can they be handed off? Or if you already have a standard operating procedure or an operations manual, figuring out what are the things that I need to train other people on. And from there, dedicating time on a weekly basis, and kind of second and third trimester is when I see this being particularly important, to train up your team. And if you I saw someone in the chat who's a solo founder. If you are trying to figure out how are certain things going to get done, this is often a time when people bring on kind of coverage or contractors, or are trying to figure out what they can automate. And so figuring out what you delegate, what you automate, and what you can actually pause and what you can put down, because there may be some things that you need to put down for the time that you're recovering, for example, or the time that you're truly unavailable. I'm going to go next to client and investor communications. So I always like to start with just the reality that talking about pregnancy in kind of the startup ecosystem is a nerve generating topic. A lot of what I hear from founders is that they are really terrified to talk to their investors, to talk to, even if it's, angel investors, all the way to someone raising a Series C round. And so I always like to start with a public service announcement that it is up to you to decide how much you want to or don't want to disclose. And it's considered PHI, protected health information, so you do not have to share anything that you do not want to share. And I'll also talk about the ways in which sharing can actually be a positive strategy. And so why might you want to strategically communicate about parental leave? Because it'll address the concerns that people have in the back of their minds that they may not be saying out loud to you. So a lot of clients might be wondering, and how, if you're a client-facing business, how will my needs get met? Investors might be wondering what is going to happen to the growth trajectory you're currently on. And so being able to clearly talk about what your leave plan is can be a way to let people know that you are aware of those concerns and that you have a plan to address them. Can also help set really clear boundaries around your availability. So if you are communicating about a leave plan where you are going to be offline or unavailable for a number of weeks or months, then that is an opportunity to publicly share with folks and have them help keep themselves accountable and you accountable to enforcing that boundary. And in that example of communication, I see your question, Brittany. I'm going to get right to it. One of the key points is to help people see that you have a plan that considers their needs. And so it's a trust building exercise in the sense that if people, in sharing your plan, people's trust in you can increase, and people's sense of your being really strongly positioned to take leave and come back and step back into the helm, then that can be an important trust building moment. And to Brittany's question on at what point is it recommended that founders communicate a plan to prospective clients, particularly if there's a sense that clients might be fearful or dissuaded from engaging. So it's interesting, in today's digital world, you could like totally not disclose, and a lot of people would not know the difference. What I often find is kind of a sweet spot is that if you know you're going to be completely unavailable, and for example, a big part of what you offer is client facing, then letting people know as they are having initial kind of inquiry calls with you. Second trimester is often when I see folks communicating to investors, and with clients anywhere from second to third trimester. Often with existing clients, it's also an opportunity for communication. So clients who, if you kind of run a retainer model, or you have clients that are with you for a year, similar to like programs that Digital Undivided offers, right? Then letting people know so they have some time to process the information, so that you are not letting folks know like the month before you are going out, would be my recommendation. And that gives people a chance to ask questions. It gives you a chance to figure out, are there any particular clients or particular investors that I might need to have a follow-up conversation with, and help assuage those fears to some extent. So on the communication front, I wanted to offer up another case study. So Sharon, again, real client, but fictional pictures for the sake of confidentiality, is an EdTech founder. And Sharon had previously been pregnant and given birth, and now her partner is pregnant, and very early, but Sharon's company is at the stage where she had just raised a seed round and was hiring some kind of founding team members. So she was going from a situation where she was founder had some contractors, but not a team, to having a robust team. So the timing ended up working out really well in terms of the operational things, kind of the, bringing on a round of new hires. It meant that there was going to be a lot of operational kind of cleaning in-house naturally. But the main thing that Sharon was grappling with is talking to potential investors, and the reality that, Sharon had given birth before, and so knew that she really wanted to be the postpartum support person for her family, and knew that she was going to take some time off. So some of the key communication points that Sharon and I work to develop, and that I oftentimes walk through with anyone, are 4 key communication points. An initial notification, and oftentimes that can be followed up with or end with a note that, like, if you have questions, please let me know. If you have any concerns, let's schedule time to talk about them. And so it becomes a conversation moment. And that initial notification can oftentimes include things like, when will you be taking leave? How long is your kind of best guess right now that you'll be taking leave? And what is kind of the range of role that you will have? Like, are you totally offline? Are you taking emails? Are you, is there a point person or liaison at your company that will be the person who gets you key information or can elevate questions if needed to you? So having as much information as possible in that initial notification about what the leave means for the person receiving the email. And then folks are getting a lot of information every day, all day. And so sending a reminder of leave about a month before is often useful, and setting up autoresponders and an email management plan while gone. The return to work notification is an interesting one because, some people are hesitant to share personal information, or, it can feel funny to talk to an investor about a very personal experience, like coming back to work after having a baby. But I've seen time and time again that when people do things like say, I'm back, and send a baby picture, everyone is so supportive, and that moment of human connection can go pretty far. And talking about returning to work, let's get into that. I'm doing a quick time check to see how we're doing. So a couple strategies for a successful transition back is, the first thing is simply to honor it as a transition, right? We rarely have times in life where we go from having one identity one day and a different identity the next day. And that's kind of how it is with parenthood. Like, you are not a parent one moment if this is your first kid, and the next day you all of a sudden have this identity as a parent. And so allowing yourself to take the time to integrate that new identity, process the transition, and especially for founders, being a founder is often a primary identity. And so when all of a sudden having a primary identity and spending a lot of time in your new identity as a parent can be a real kind of conflict of identity and process of figuring out and integrating what that means for you. And then a couple tactical things. Updating work calendars and schedules before you actually come back can be a hugely useful thing to your team, to your clients, to your collaborators. And having things like, if you are pumping, having that time blocked off as do not disturb, as D&D. It doesn't have to say like making milk for a hungry human on your calendar, but if you put a time block, that can often help signal that those are times that you really are protecting. And similarly with childcare commitments, if you have hard start and stop times, noting that for your colleagues can be useful, so that especially if that wasn't the case before, so that they can honor those boundaries. And then one other thing I often talk about is the 30-60-90 as a strategy. And so 30-60-90s are oftentimes used with new hires to check in 30 days in, 60 days in, 90 days in. And because returning from parental leave can be such a big transition, treating that return like a new hire could be a useful strategy. And so blocking time off on your calendar to have 30 days in, a reflection on what's working, what's not working, what do you need to shift in terms of your schedule or your role, or what kind of how you're showing up for your team can be useful in doing the same at 60 days in and at the end of the first quarter back. And those 30-60-90s can oftentimes be a good chance to really revisit what you're doing on a day-to-day basis. So oftentimes when people leave and delegate or hand off work, coming back can be a moment of trying to figure out, like, what do I do now? Some of the things that were using up a lot of my time before I went on leave are now handled by other people. And so it can be a kind of the silver lining of having taken parental leave and putting so much work into delegating and getting your operations in order, especially if you were holding a lot of the operational pieces before, can be that it frees up some of your time to think about what new space do I have for some of the strategic thinking and big picture thinking or growth planning. I'm seeing a couple questions in the chat. I'm going to get through the presentation and we will come back to those. Thank you, Joel. So in addition to the work to-dos and the tactical things, there's also a couple personal things that I often like to touch on. I feel like it's the health professional in me is still also wanting to make sure that people are coming back to work, feeling physically and psychologically as whole as possible. And so any health concerns that you might experience during leave as a result of childbirth or as a result of the transition to parenting, getting time with your provider before you are back, and if needed, setting routine time where you have provider check-ins even as you return to work can be hugely helpful for you to show up as your best self. Practicing a childcare routine before the first week you are back. I oftentimes talk about like the 2 weeks between right before your leave or right before your return. So the very last 2 weeks of your leave, that is often the ideal time to start trying out your new routine. So it gives your child a chance to practice what's it like being away from you. If you have been with them for extended amount of time and they are used to you or kind of a small group of people, then having a chance to do a trial run before you're having to sit or go somewhere or be away from them for an extended period of time. And the last is to reach out for help. We all have support systems that range from friends and family and community to professional resources that we can tap. And then founder affinity groups, finding, there's lots of kind of mom parenting spaces online, but there are fewer that are the intersection of new parents and founders. And so that is a really unique experience. And so seeing where you can find a cohort of people who are experiencing some of the same things as you. Planning steps and timeline. I think this, Brittany, when we talked about when is a good time to communicate with clients, this is speaks somewhat to that, but I often encourage people, even if you are not pregnant, even if you're just thinking about what growing your family could be like, to start thinking about what your ideal leave experience could look like. Because oftentimes it takes a couple months at least to get things into place. And then in the first trimester, or 6 to 8 months prior to taking leave, is often when I recommend folks look into those funding options, particularly if you know you're going to be purchasing disability insurance. This is something that you can do prior to pregnancy. This is something you can set up before you are even thinking about having a family, just as one of the insurance benefits that you have. And then around the second trimester, 2 to 6 months prior to taking leave, that's often when a lot of the business operations work and updating your operations manual, getting standard operating procedures updated and in order and delegated to folks, training folks up, as well as the communications piece. And then in the third trimester, I often work with folks to build out a postpartum support plan and a return to work plan, which can often look like getting extra support than you might normally have during that window of postpartum and return to work. How much time should you take is often a question that comes up. So I like to just have that be one of the things that I address. And the interesting thing is that the best scientific evidence we have, and this is from kind of 3 decades of research conducted in various countries with varying paid leave policies, really indicates that about 6 months of paid leave is optimal. And we know that that's not realistic for everyone, for most people, actually. I think in the US, most birthing people go back to work within 10 days of having had a child. And so what I like to encourage people to prioritize is the postpartum recovery and support phase. So it's often, if you're giving birth 2 to 6 weeks after that, if you are supporting someone who has given birth, or if you are adopting or have your child through surrogacy, then having time for that really early infant bonding stage is important. So prioritizing that 2 to 6 week infancy stage and postpartum stage. And then with founders, one of the main things that is again, the silver lining in a world where there's not many silver linings to not having a paid leave infrastructure, is that unlike people who work for companies who tell them you got to be back this day 100%, that you can maximize some flexibility and you can figure out, do I want to transition back part-time? Do I want to transition back certain days? Do I want to come back to client-facing work at a different time than I come back to the strategic work or kind of marketing work, and figuring out what are the ways in which make most sense for you to come back into your business. So I'll pause here to jump to Joel's question. And if other questions are coming up, please feel free to drop them in the chat. So the question is around any special considerations you've seen in LGBTQ or same-sex partners related to the family leave programs you mentioned. So state paid leave programs are usually covered for childbirth and bonding. And so even if you are not, if a child isn't coming into your life via childbirth, you can still apply for paid leave via bonding. And that covers adoption, surrogacy, and non-birthing parents in general. It's a great question around the private insurance option, because that, for the most part, is specifically framed as a disability leave. And so that often is just covering people who have given birth. We won't get into why childbirth is considered a disability, but the reality of that private disability insurance option is that it's going to basically provide inequitable coverage. It'll only provide coverage to people who have physically given birth. And I will take my screen down to be able to see all of you. Let me see if I had anything else that might, okay, questions and feedback, here we are. So I will stop sharing.
And as I mentioned in the chat, we're moving to the Q&A portion of the event. So you have not done so already. You may drop your questions in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. And we can get that started.
Okay, I see Carmen's question of advice for a founding team that is a couple where one partner is expecting. Yes, it doesn't happen like very often, but I'm always surprised at the amount of times that it comes across my radar. And so that often is a situation where both people probably need to take some leave. And it often is a question of figuring out what are the, at what time frame is the person who's giving birth going to take leave? And that often is focused on much more of the recovery period. And then allowing time for the other person to take leave kind of non-continuously, if you will. And so oftentimes folks can stagger their leave. And again, if you, especially if you don't have a concrete policy and you're trying to figure out what works with the business needs, what works with our family's needs, then taking some leave in like 2-week or 3-week blocks is a solution that I've seen some people do. And because it's interesting, I've often found that with couples, founders who are couples and taking leave, that there is less of an opportunity for founders to be out of the loop because they are constantly being kept in the loop by their partner. If one person is off, that's often a challenge for kind of solo founders to figure out how am I going to stay in the loop of what is going on in the business and who's the point person at the organization who's going to keep me in the loop. And I've often seen that founder couples can play that role for each other. Well, folks are welcome to reach out to me via email, or I'm on LinkedIn and Instagram pretty frequently. And I definitely welcome any questions or follow-up, and appreciate you all sharing some of your time. I'm seeing one more question about hiring. If you hire additional support to help replace a co-founder, who are you typically looking to hire? So I think it depends. This is oftentimes where doing the time tracking and figuring out where a founder is spending most of their time, and then figuring out what are the things that you need to support. And so it can look pretty differently, kind of company to company and founder to founder in terms of a profile of what you are looking for. Oftentimes it is a consultant role who will come in for overlap for sometimes. So I recommend at least like a 3 to 4 week overlap to essentially train folks up and get them situated in the role before a founder leaves. And then having them do fill the roles that fall into the only founder category, as opposed to if you have other team members. Oftentimes there's things that a founder is doing that can be supported by a team member, either temporarily or kind of permanently handed off. And Hannah's question on how detailed should company parental policies be? Oh, you have the fun task of writing it up. So I think at the bare minimum, it is useful to have how many weeks the benefit will include, and whether it is paid or unpaid, because there are a lot of places that have essentially unpaid family leave. So our FMLA, it's the Family Medical Leave Act, covers 12 weeks of family or medical leave, but there is no obligation to pay. And so that's kind of, we have a very low bar in terms of what is required for parental leave. And that's 12 weeks leave. And that really just means that your job will be protected for 12 weeks. So anything above that is a win. And some people, especially early stage startups, oftentimes are grappling with, can you cover people fully, or are you paying a percentage? Or for people who are in states that where they can tap into a state paid leave policy, are you making people whole or topping people up to their full salary? And so the policy should include as much as you can about time off, payment. And also I found it's very useful to have kind of the company's point of view on transition back. And so thinking about, can it be a gradual transition? Can people come back to work part-time? Can people start on like a Wednesday, their first week back? So sometimes those levels of detail help people really think about, oh, what would my return look like? What would my time off look like? And how could I use the time that I have access to? And people are obviously in different financial situations, and so oftentimes will be forming their leave plans around the mix of time off and payment. I see a hand.
Hi. Yes, thank you, Arianna. I am a colleague of Patricia's at Digital Undivided, and I wanted to thank you for doing this today, because in the over 12 years I've been in the entrepreneurship space, I've never heard anyone actually present on this topic in this way. And I think it's really helpful. Some of the founders that I work with in our programs actually take care of their senior parents. And I was seeing like different use cases in what you were talking about in creating a sustainable model. Have you seen that in some of the other entrepreneurs that you help and consult for?
Yeah, it's funny that when the book came out, which is really focused on parental leave planning, I had people who read it and were like, "This is great for just like taking a vacation," or if my elder parent has surgery and I need to figure out how to be there as a caregiver. And so a lot of the strategies are pretty transferable across contexts, where a founder just needs to turn their attention to other humans for some time. And even though I tend to talk about things based on the experience of welcoming a new infant, it is totally applicable to other situations.
Great, thank you.
Patricia, your question on building a leave fund is important. At minimum, how much should you have on reserve? So that typically depends on team size and also team demographics. So if you have a team that is like mostly people who are out of this kind of childbearing age, then you probably need less of a leave fund than if you have a bunch of people in kind of prime reproductive age. Oftentimes it also should take into account location of your team. And so if you have a lot of team members that actually are in states where there is a paid leave policy, and the company will be doing more of a supplementing that or kind of making them whole, then you can have a lower reserve than if you, for example, if you know your entire team is based in states where they don't have access to that. These are such great questions. It's making me think about like, maybe there's like a 201 level of parental leave planning.
I think your next book is already around the corner.
Awesome. Any other questions for Arianna while we have her here? If not, we can wrap up. Before we do so, so thank you so much, first of all, to Arianna and Kayla, for jumping on board to help us organize this event. And then in addition, I wanted to quickly flag.
We got one more question that just came in the chat.
Oh.
Yeah.
Love the last minute question. Let's go for it.
We, for my social work days, we call them doorknob questions. It's like right when the client's about to walk out the door and literally has the doorknob in their hand, they're like, actually, I have one more thing. And so Claire's question on what is a pitfall you've seen founders fall into? I think the most common thing I hear is founders right off the bat saying, well, I'm a founder, I just can't take leave. Like that's not an option for me. And so one of the biggest pieces of work that I do with folks is kind of digging into that a little more and talking about scenarios. Like what would happen if you took 2 weeks? What would happen if you took 4 weeks? What would need to be possible if you wanted to take 8 weeks? And kind of playing out the reality of your leave probably won't look like people's leave where they take 4 months off and kind of shut the door completely to their work and are totally immersed in family life. Like that is really not most founders' reality. And so pushing people to move from a question of, can I even take leave, to what is a way that I could design a leave that would work for the stage that my business is in and the realities of my personal life. And I'll hand it back to you, Patricia.
Awesome. Last minute, final call for last minute doorknob question. Awesome. Well, like I said, thank you, Arianna. Thank you, Kayla, and Start Out. Wanted to quickly share information about our upcoming event. Specifically on March 14th, we're having How to Unlock Money for Your Startup with Tax Taker. So this particular event talks about R&D and employee retention tax credits, what business activities and expenses really qualify for these credits, and how to apply and claim the money that you could potentially be owed. So with that, we'll wrap up. Thank you all for joining. See you guys next time.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Here.